They saw a black woman in first class and decided she didn't belong. Minutes before takeoff, security walked down the aisle, eyes locked on her. Passengers stared. Whispers spread. No explanation. No apology. Just a cold instruction: stand up. Leave. Now. She wasn't loud. She wasn't disruptive. She was dressed for a board meeting, laptop open, preparing for the biggest deal of her career. But none of that mattered. In that moment, all they saw was the color of her skin, and a seat they assumed she couldn't afford. What they didn't know: the woman they escorted off that plane didn't just have a ticket. She had power, influence, and a decision to make that would shake the airline to its core. By sunrise, billions of dollars were on the line. The question is, when you humiliate someone who holds the future of your company in her hands, who really loses? Her heels clicked against the floor as she stepped off the plane. Passengers began lifting their phones. Some stared in silence. Others looked away, relieved it wasn't them. The humiliation wasn't loud, but it was suffocating. Being asked to stand, to gather her things, to walk the aisle under the weight of 100 assumptions. She could feel it, the unspoken narrative forming in their minds. She must have done something. She must not belong here. Still, as she handed over her ticket at the gate, she noticed the pause. The double take. The subtle shift in tone. It wasn't new. She had seen that look before. The kind that measures you, doubts you, decides you don't quite fit. She took her seat anyway. What she didn't know was that before the plane even left the ground, someone had already decided she didn't belong in it. For most people at the airport that morning, it was just another flight. Another boarding call. Another rushed goodbye. But for her, it was the culmination of 20 years of relentless work. She had built her company from a single rented office with second-hand furniture into a global investment firm managing billions. Long nights. Missed holidays. Meetings where she was the only black woman in the room, and often the youngest. She learned early how to stay composed when people questioned her credentials, how to smile when they assumed she was the assistant, how to let her results speak louder than their doubts. That flight wasn't a vacation. It was a critical trip to finalize a multi-billion-dollar funding partnership, one that could reshape an entire industry. Her firm was preparing to invest heavily in infrastructure, including major airline contracts. The numbers were massive. The decision even bigger. She arrived early, dressed in a tailored navy suit, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every inch of her success. First class wasn't a luxury to her. It was practicality, time to prepare, space to think. The cabin doors were still open when she felt it, that shift in the air. A flight attendant approached her row, her smile tight, rehearsed. She glanced at the boarding pass in her hand, then at the woman seated comfortably in 2A. Another pause. Another look. The kind that silently asks, "Are you sure?" Moments later, 2 security officers stepped onto the plane. They didn't check the overhead bins. They didn't scan the cabin. They walked with purpose straight toward her. Conversations around her faded into whispers. "We need you to come with us." No explanation. No accusation. Just an instruction that felt more like a verdict. Her chest tightened, but her voice stayed calm. She showed her ticket. First class. Confirmed. Paid in full. The officer barely glanced at it. "There's been a concern," he said flatly. A concern. That was all. At the gate, the questions came, vague and circular. Was this really her seat? Had there been a mix-up? Was her payment verified? Each inquiry laced with doubt, none supported by evidence. Her ticket was scanned again. Valid. Her ID checked. Valid. Her corporate card on file. More than valid. Still, no apology. Just a cold, procedural tone. "We're sorting it out." Sorting what out? Minutes stretched into nearly an hour. The plane remained at the gate. Frustration rippled through the cabin. But no one seemed to question why she was the only passenger removed. Finally, a supervisor arrived. His expression shifted the moment he recognized her name. Not her face. Her name. The same name attached to a firm currently negotiating a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure investment package. A package that included a strategic partnership with this very airline. Color drained from his face. His posture changed. The tone softened. Suddenly, there were apologies. A misunderstanding. Protocol. We value all of our customers. But the damage had already settled into the pit of her stomach. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't protocol. It was assumption. And assumption in that moment had exposed something much bigger than a seating dispute. She was eventually invited back onto the aircraft. Same seat. Same cabin. Now painfully silent. But something had shifted. She didn't open her laptop this time. She didn't review her presentation. Instead, she stared out the window as the plane finally lifted into the sky. Because at 30,000 feet, she wasn't thinking about the deal anymore. She was thinking about power. And whether this airline truly understood who they had just embarrassed. By the time the wheels touched down, she had made a decision. One that wouldn't just affect her pride. It would cost them billions. The boardroom overlooked the skyline, all glass and steel and quiet power. Executives filled the long walnut table, analysts, advisors, legal teams, waiting for her signal to begin. On the screen behind her glowed the airline's logo. They had no idea. Just hours earlier, she had been standing in an airport corridor, questioned like she had stolen something. Stripped of dignity in front of strangers. Reduced to a suspicion. Now, every eye in the room was on her. Her chief financial officer outlined the proposal, a $5 billion infrastructure investment package. Fleet modernization. Sustainability initiatives. Long-term partnership. The airline stood to gain stability, growth, survival in a brutal market. All they needed was her approval. Her phone buzzed. An email from the airline's corporate office. An apology. Carefully worded. Legalistic. Focused on miscommunication. Not discrimination. Not profiling. Not humiliation. Miscommunication. Around the table, her team waited. She remembered the aisle. The stairs. The officer's hand gesturing toward the exit like she was a problem to be removed. She remembered how quickly their tone changed once they recognized her name. Not her humanity, her value. That was the moment everything became clear. If her power only mattered when attached to money, then money would be the language she used. She stood. Calm. Controlled. Certain. "We're withdrawing," she said. No anger in her voice. No theatrics. Just finality. Silence swallowed the room. $5 billion gone with a sentence. Her legal team exchanged stunned looks. The airline representatives on the video call froze, confusion turning into panic as the implications settled in. In that instant, the balance shifted. They had removed her from a seat. She removed their future. And as the screen went dark, one truth echoed louder than any apology ever could. Respect isn't optional, especially when the person you disrespect holds the power to change everything. By the end of the week, the airline released a public statement. This time, the language was different. An internal investigation. Mandatory bias training. Leadership restructuring. A commitment to rebuild trust. But trust isn't rebuilt with press releases. It's rebuilt with accountability. The story leaked anyway. Not because she called a press conference. Not because she wanted attention. But because power leaves a paper trail. Investors started asking questions. Advocacy groups took notice. News outlets began connecting the dots. And suddenly, what happened in Seat 2A wasn't just an incident. It was a mirror. She didn't celebrate withdrawing the funding. There was no victory lap. No viral speech. Just a quiet understanding that what she did wasn't about revenge, it was about consequence. Because the truth is, she would have still been removed from that plane if her name hadn't meant billions. That's what lingered. Not the embarrassment. Not even the anger. But the realization that respect came only after recognition of her financial power, not her humanity. She returned to work the next morning. Same determination. Same discipline. But something inside her had hardened. Not into bitterness, into clarity. Her success had protected her. But what about the woman who doesn't control $5 billion? What about the man whose name doesn't trigger panic in a boardroom? How many people are quietly escorted off planes, out of stores, out of opportunities, without ever having the leverage to push back? This wasn't just her story. It was a reminder. Racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it hides behind the word protocol. And the real question isn't what she did with her power. It's what we'll do with ours.